just saying to our last guest that clearly the Democrats desperately want this to be true. They talked about opening an inquiry. What is the next step for Democrats just in terms of gathering witnesses and just gathering evidence to try to figure out if this actually is true?
Hi, Zain. So certainly Democrats are very eager to look into these very explosive allegations that came from BuzzFeed. I see two ways they can go about this. There's the more conservative way, lowercase conservative, which is basically to say, you know what, we're going to wait for Special Counsel Mueller to finish his investigation, no matter how long that takes, and see what evidence he has regarding these allegations surrounding Michael Cohen and the president, and see what happens. The second path, which many Democrats seem very eager for, is to say, you know what, we're not going to wait for Special Counsel Mueller. He can continue what he's looking at, but we in the House have our own oversight responsibilities, and we're going to investigate ourselves. And that means calling witnesses, looking at documents, speaking to Michael Cohen, and getting to the bottom of it.
And just in terms of, you know, indicting a sitting president, a lot of people are talking about the fact that you can't indict a sitting president. Could that change, given the circumstances, do you think?
Zain, I mean, with the Trump administration controlling the Justice Department, because it is politically controlled, ultimately, I mean, it's unlikely that that regulation will be revisited, right? And it's just a regulation, and it can be changed, but it would take the executive department and the Justice Department to actually do that. So more likely, this will be an action for Congress. Congress has the impeachment power. We know exactly how it works, and we know how they can implement it. And of course, with the Democrats controlling the House, there's not much Republicans can do to stop it. So while indictment is certainly a possibility, and I very well expect it will be in the headlines and discussed, more likely than not, impeachment is the route that would be followed, especially because this particular offense has to do with lying to Congress.
Okay, and speaking of lying to Congress, I mean, you talked about the fact that the U.S. Justice Department is politically controlled. You had William Barr up on Capitol Hill with those confirmation hearings. He was actually asked, you know, what would happen if the president or someone directed someone else to lie to Congress. I want to play you what he had to say to that question.
So if there was some reason to believe that the president tried to coach somebody not to testify or testify falsely, that could be obstruction of justice.
Yes, under that, under an obstruction statute, yes.
So if there's some evidence that the president tried to conceal evidence, that would be obstruction of justice, potentially, right?
In your memo, you talked about the Comey decision, and you talked about obstruction of justice, and you already went over that, which I appreciate. You wrote on page 1 that a president persuading a person to commit perjury would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or any person who persuades another to, yeah.
Okay. You also said that a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so you mentioned that obviously the U.S. Justice Department is politically controlled, but there you have it. The future, assuming, we believe that he's going to be confirmed. So the future AG of the United States basically saying that the president's behavior would potentially be obstruction of justice. So how tricky and murky does that make things for the president, do you think?
Well, first off, I was really heartened to see that, because that most former prosecutors, legal scholars, believe that, yes, a president can obstruct justice. So the fact that some people say that's not possible, I don't believe that. And I was really happy to see that the nominee agreed with that position. Like, yes, witness tampering, lying, those are obstruction of justice, even if committed by the president. So the only question will be, if the evidence is there to support these allegations, what to do about it. And so it's, again, whether you bring charges against a sitting president as if in a courtroom, like an indictment and a prosecution, or you go the impeachment route, which addresses high crimes and misdemeanors and allows Congress to pursue whatever the charges are, including perjury, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and anything else the evidence might bring forth.
I want to just read you what Rudy Giuliani had to say about all of this, just to give that side of things. He says, today's claims are just more made-up lies born of Michael Cohen's malice and desperation in an effort to reduce his sentence. You know, obviously we know that Donald Trump, how do I say this, isn't necessarily the most trustworthy, but neither is Michael Cohen. So doesn't that make things just so much more tricky in terms of knowing who to believe?
That was very tactful of you, actually. But yes,
I tried.
That was great. I, as a lawyer, and I've been on both sides of the aisle, right, as a prosecutor and now as a defense counsel, and I always say, what's the evidence? Michael Cohen's testimony by itself might not be the greatest evidence. He has his own issues with truthfulness. So what I want to see is, okay, Michael Cohen says he was directed by the president to lie about the Moscow project. What else substantiates his testimony? Are there emails? Are there text messages? Are there other witnesses that overheard conversations? Are there recordings of conversations? There's a whole wealth of information that could be out there. And the BuzzFeed article does imply that that evidence exists. So if Michael Cohen's testimony alone might not do it, that testimony coupled with substantiating evidence could be sufficient. And so that's what's going to be scrutinized.
Memos, apparently, emails, text messages, court hearings.
Right.
I mean, we believe that there's other sort of substantiated evidence out there beyond just taking Michael Cohen's word for it.
That will be critical.
All right, Joseph Moreno, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Zane. Good to be here.